Dragon Ballers, if you're looking to buy Dragon Ball Super or One Piece sealed product, make sure to get 5% off using my link to Mystic TCG down in the description. You can also sell cards to them using their Facebook link, which is also down in the description. Yo, what's going on, One Piecers? Welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be a much more discussion style type of video. And of course, I want to know down in the comments what you guys think about my takes in this video, because everyone's got different opinions, and maybe even offering different solutions could just be a helpful thing in general. So in today's video, I'm going to give my thoughts on what would make One Piece a much better competitive card game for those of us that want to travel to the Treasure Cups and start playing in the regionals in March. And in my opinion, this is actually a desperate but also very easy fix that One Piece needs. So we're gonna get into that in the video. If you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video, and let's jump right on in. What am I suggesting that One Piece needs for competitive play? That is sideboarding. So here's kind of just like the down low and dirty with One Piece. Now, me personally, being primarily a Dragon Ball Super player, which is mostly what my content is generally aimed towards, I am new to the world of One Piece, been very much enjoying it, playing a lot with my team, and I am going to the Dallas Treasure Cup in about 2 weeks now. But also having deep-rooted roots, I guess, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is my original card game, my original competitive card game, I see things from a few different perspectives, and I think that gives me kind of a balanced perspective. The thing with One Piece is, it's a very frustrating game to play competitively. It is extraordinarily fun to play at locals, to play webcams with my teammates online. It is very fun, but competitively, this game is very frustrating, and that's due to a couple factors. One of which is one that I've mentioned in a few of the recent meta breakdowns. One of those being that the game is rather inconsistent, and you know, this might just be a thing of me being spoiled from Dragon Ball Super, which is easily the most or the second most consistent card game on the market, where a lot of player skill really shines. I think there is a great amount of player skill in One Piece as well. I think that playing with the hand you're dealt is definitely a skill in and of itself, and knowing how to equip Dawn properly is also a really big deal. But come on, guys, you know that you get those certain hands in One Piece that really just don't allow you to play the game. It does happen, you know, maybe, I don't know, 1 out of every 10 games, 1 out of every 2 out of 10 games, maybe. That's just a, you know, ballpark estimate, but you guys know those types of games do happen. And I've talked to a lot of high profile players, both in the Dragon Ball Super community and players that have done well in One Piece, and they express the same concerns. And it kind of goes back to Digimon a little bit as well, where Dragon Ball Super was the flagship, you know, Bandai card game, and then Digimon came out and it was a wildly different game. It was played best of one. There was no mulligan, no sideboarding, and it was you know, much more fun on the casual side. I even enjoyed playing Digimon casually for a little bit, but competitively it can be very, very frustrating, even for the players who do very well. I think One Piece is somewhere smack dab in the middle of Dragon Ball and Digimon, where it's not solely there for the casual audience. It is also meant to be there a bit for the competitive card game players that have that mindset. But I think, again, it is a bit of a struggle to play competitively, because if you have those bad hands, you're pretty much going to lose that game, and you only have one chance in best of one to win. Otherwise, your entire tournament can be changed by that one loss, as opposed to best of 3, where you have much more of an opportunity to come back in those next 2 games if you lose the first one, stuff like that. Now, I'm not proposing One Piece picks up best of 3. We'll talk more about that later. The other thing I want to talk about with One Piece, and why it can be a bit frustrating to play competitively, is sometimes it can feel very matchup based. For example, generally it's thought that Kid has a really positive matchup into Zoro, so if you come across a Kid player as a Zoro player, you might just be expecting to lose on the spot. And of course, that's not 100% guaranteed. You might beat that Kid player, but if you're not favored, that is a pretty big feels bad. I'll tell you, for my personal experience as a Kid player, the Kaido matchup can be rather tough, and if I face that deck, I, you know, again, might think I have a high chance of losing. I might still beat them. There might be an upset there, and again, they might draw an unplayable hand, and maybe I draw a favorable hand, but that doesn't really contribute to the merit of a competitive card game, right? I didn't sign up to basically sit down and play a dice roll simulator, whereas going first second also makes a big deal, but that's just card games in general. I also didn't sign up to play a matchup based simulator. If I sit across from the wrong matchup, I don't want to just automatically lose on the spot. That's where sideboarding plays a big role in the merit of a competitive card game. Now, firstly, I want to talk about why I think sideboarding would be really good for One Piece, and then I'm going to talk about my ideas for implementing it into the game. So let's just go through that right now. Now, why do I think sideboarding would be good for One Piece? Well, One Piece is actually very surprising in set 1 because unlike a lot of other card games, there are just a lot of good cards in set 1 that would serve as really good side deck cards. Personally, I think that's due in part to how well set 1 of One Piece was designed and balanced, because pretty much every color is good. There is at least one playable deck in every color, and that is a good sign of balance. Now, I have a couple examples here, one of which is Killer versus X-Drake. Now, me being a green player, this is kind of like my area of expertise. In my opinion, I think you want to play Killer if you're expecting a much more red heavy meta, where you have like the Zoros with the Rush Zoros, or the Luffy with the Rush Zoros, and they're just turning, like, you know, small cards sideways. But Killer is not so great against blue decks, where Doflamingo literally just plays a 4-drop in rest mode, and in those particular cases, Killer doesn't actually really do much. You'd actually rather have X-Drake to just straight up remove that 4-drop that Doflamingo has played in rest mode. So that would be a great implementation of side decking, where if I'm up against a red player, I can have Killer ready to go, and if I'm up against a blue player, I can have X-Drake ready to go, and that alone would alleviate, you know, this matchup dependency where, oh, I built my deck to play against a bunch of red because generally red's been very popular in the metagame, but my tournament bracket just so happened to have me face against 4 Dofi players, and I wasn't prepared for it. That could alleviate a big pain point for players. Next up, another example, we have a defensive example, which is Guard Point versus Radical Beam. In most videos I've done for red, I've talked about the difference between these cards. I think that in a lot of cases, Guard Point is probably just better more often than not, because Radical Beam requires your opponent to play a certain way, and generally in card games, when a card's merit is based on your opponent doing something you need them to do, it's generally not that great if it requires your opponent to make it live or bring it online or something along those lines. So you could bring in each negate if sideboard was a thing, depending on matchup. Let's say you're up against an aggressive mirror match. Let's say it's Zoro versus Zoro, and they're swinging heavy at your life. Well, in that case, Radical Beam would probably be a much better card. But on the flip side, let's say you're playing against that Kid matchup, where you know that they're really not going to give you much life early on. They're going to really just focus on clearing your board. In that scenario, Guard Point would be much better, because if they're going to swing at your Rush Zoro for 7k, which is a very good number for Kid to be swinging at that Zoro for, Guard Point for 1 Dawn and 1 card protects that Zoro on your board, which can be a huge game changer. But again, with all the different negates we have in set 1, or I should say counter event cards, not a Dragon Ball card game here, with all those different types of cards we have in the event counter slot in just set 1, there would be a good merit to have sideboard, because it would just, you know, sway matchups so much. And that would be another form of skill expression, where if you know a matchup inside and out, and you know this particular card will help you win that matchup, you have the sideboard in order to express that skill, which again would just be great for the competitive side of One Piece. And the final example I have here for you guys, let's start with Straw Sword. So Straw Sword is a card that some Kid players are ballsy enough to main deck 1 or even 2 copies of. I am personally not ballsy enough to do that. Straw Sword is actually a really good card in the right circumstances, but against like your reds, it's not going to be super good. Like there's nothing in red you really want to pay 2 to tap. You don't really want to pay 2 to tap a Chopper, because your Cat Viper in your main deck already does that. But for example, if you are up against the Kaido matchup, which is actually again a rough matchup for the Kid deck, you could use Straw Sword for 2 Dawn to rest that Queen blocker that's maybe preventing you from swinging at their face or swinging at their board, or that could set up like a Basil Hawkins play, right? So that's another scenario where sideboarding could overall benefit the game. And there's another card here, which is Demon Face. This is a really interesting card in my opinion, because getting removal on 2 different cards in a Summoning Sickness game is a very powerful effect. I mean, look at King 7. That card is absolutely cracked. Just kill 2 guys on play. Those guys didn't get to do anything worth value in terms of attacking or blocking if they're just blockers. But yeah, Demon Face, very interesting card. I have not seen a single Kid player main this card, and if there is no side deck in the game for the, let's just say, the rest of the game's history, which I doubt is actually going to be the case, but let's just say that is the case, then a card like Demon Face, which is much more niche in usage, will never ever see play, because it can be good in like a blue matchup where, let's say, your Dofi opponent plays a Boa Hancock in rest mode, and then maybe you swing with an Okiku and tap like their Kuma blocker or something along those lines. You can then play Demon Face to pop both those characters, but it's only going to be good in that matchup. But again, leave it up to the player to decide they want to side deck this card for that specific matchup. Leaving the sideboard open to interpretation would just be a great thing for players overall. But now I've explained a bunch of scenarios where I think side decking would be really good for One Piece and its competitive player base, but you've got to weigh the pros and the cons, right? Does sideboarding really bring any downside to the game? In my opinion, no, it doesn't really bring any downside at all, except for one that I think some players would have an issue with, and that would be longer match times, because the typical way that sideboarding is introduced is in best of 3 formats. Now here's the problem with One Piece. A One Piece competitive round is 35 to 40 minutes, and if you were to multiply that by 3, you'd have a very long round timer that would exponentially increase the size of tournaments, especially with these treasure cups where we've had like 500 player tournaments. You would literally be playing the rest of Swiss in day 2 and then finishing Top Cut that day. So Saturday and Sunday would probably end around like, you know, Saturday ending around like 10-11 o'clock at night, and then Sunday ending probably like 7 or 8 p.m., which nobody really wants, to be quite honest. Like, I totally get that, but you don't have to use best of 3 in order to implement a sideboard. So what we can do is we can use sideboard best of 1, which is actually something I saw implemented in Dragon Ball Super, of course, and a little bit of Digimon and some other card games, especially when the whole COVID thing happened and many games went to digital, virtual, and webcam based gameplay. Pre-side best of 1 is a great format, I think, particularly for One Piece. It doesn't fix the problem of you only get one opportunity to win that match like current best of 1 has, but it does fix the matchup based gameplay problem, where again, if I gave you any of those examples just before with the different counters in red or the straw sword example in green, if I'm the green player and I come across a Kaido deck, I see them put their leader down, I can then go into my sideboard before the game starts, put in my straw swords, take out, let's say, 2 cards if I'm siding in 2 straw swords, and then play that game where my deck is not at an immediate disadvantage just based on the leader my opponent's playing. And again, that's due in part to some of the really good design that One Piece has in set 1. One Piece has a lot of cards in set 1 that are good in certain matchups that do actually help swing matchups, but they're not widely applicable enough to be justified as to be played in the main deck of different strategies. So that's where I think pre-side best of 1 would be a really painless and harmless change to the game that would not really increase match timers. All you would really need is like 2 minutes on each match just to give players the time to actually sideboard. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not actually adding all that much. So I do think that would actually be a really good thing for the One Piece card game. Now, to be honest, like I said before, I don't think that One Piece is going to stay a game without sideboard. I just don't see that being a thing in the future. But I mean, I think it'd be better sooner rather than later. Obviously, they probably won't implement this for the rest of the Treasure Cup season, which I think is totally fine. It's basically the first competitive circuit of the One Piece card game in its infancy. But we have regionals starting in March, and I believe all those regionals are set 2 and above, if I'm not mistaken. That would be a perfect time to implement pre-side best of 1, even more cards coming out, even more potential candidates for players sideboards, and I think that would again alleviate a lot of frustrations that people have with competitive One Piece. But who knows, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm the only person that has a problem with competitive One Piece, even though I had people tell me these same types of things. But I want to know in the comments below, what would you think? Do you think pre-side best of 1 would be a good thing for competitive One Piece? Do you have any other solutions to offer up? Of course, let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.